election of offices. I would like to ask our distinguished former secretary, George Allen, to come up, put his misgivings aside, and run this thing.
Thank you, Bob. Now you can sit down. I guess you're out of office temporarily. Anyway, I'm the nominating committee chairman. They pull me out every year to do this. Hopefully this will be the last time. First of all, I'd like to recognize all the members of the board. It's a huge board, and they do a great job, and trust me, they work very hard. And you've already met some of them. K.C. Smith, and then there's Rebecca Wooster back there. Could you stand up, Rebecca?
Wooster with an F. Wooster with an F.
Okay. Okay. And Claude Kennison. Where are you, Claude? There you are. Dave. Yes, indeed. Dave Lang. I don't think Dave is here. Sarah Patterson. Toria Osborne. Are you here, Toria? Oh, no. There you go. Yeah. Thank you for your service. Joanna Oates. Lynn McCarty. You've met Doug Smith. And also Marjorie Holliday, who is ever on the board. Works so hard. Well, thank you all, board members. What I'm going to do is list our officers to be elected. Now, all the board members are on for another year, and they're all at large. The officers are up for election, and we will need to vote on them tonight. For secretary is Tom Eaton. Can you stand up, Tom? Will Gandy, who you've met before, Vice President and Treasurer. And then Bob Holliday, of course, our ever-present omnipotent Treasurer. Those are our nominees for officers of the Historic Society. Are there any other nominations from the floor? Hearing none. Mr. President, do we elect now, or do you do it later? Yeah, okay. All in favor of these officers being elected to office by unanimous decision, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Hearing none, you are elected, and you're going to work for another year.
Thank you, George. You're in for it now. Thank you all very much for both confidence for all of us. I love being president of this organization. I do. Yes. This is Susan, our book dealer, among other things, wants to want to come forth and say the mic.
No, I don't need it, but something that Sarah was alluding to, I thought needed to be said a little bit more about. And that is, you don't get new members if you're a stagnant organization. And with Bob's leadership and his skill in programming, we have had one heck of a year. Think about all of the programs that we have been treated to. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Your money will be waiting for you. Well, thank you. That includes most of our agenda, so it is time for our program, and I'm going to ask Will, our new Vice President and Treasurer, to make the introductions of our speakers tonight.
I thought you were done with me. Not yet. A few years ago at the Tallahassee Museum, well, many of you know I'm the assistant curator at the Tallahassee Museum. A few years ago, I had the task of bringing down the Emancipation Day celebration. And many of you know that Emancipation Day is May 20th here in Florida. And one of the things that I went out to do was find some amazing Emancipation Day speakers.
Can you speak a little louder?
So one of the things that I had to do at the museum was resurrect our Emancipation Day celebration. And one of the first things I did was to find some good speakers. Those speakers happen to be with us tonight. And for that celebration, we actually broke a ton of records, and you're gonna see why tonight. So with us, we have Gloria Jefferson Anderson, and I'm gonna read you a little bit about Gloria right now. Gloria Jefferson Anderson is an independent historian, researcher, genealogist, and one of the leaders of the African American Cemetery Restoration Project here in the region. She's also one of the premier scholars on Emancipation Day history. Gloria specializes in disseminating the oral histories of the 20th of May, beginning May 20th, 1865 in the countryside of Tesserina Primitive Baptist Church. Gloria has also traced her ancestors from 1828 to 1865 and has uncovered the stories of their lives on El Destino Plantation here in Leon County. Also with us, we have Hunter Hill Jr. Hunter Hill Jr. is a historian, scholar, and an expert on Emancipation Day celebrations here in Leon County. And he's one of the senior members of the community who knows the Emancipation Day drumbeat. Hunter is also an accomplished artist and the 2020 Florida Folk Heritage Award winner. Artistically, Hunter Hill Jr. is acclaimed for his replica model creations. The Hunter Hill Jr. collection includes 29 scale models of African American homes, stores, churches, and businesses in Leon County during the 19th and 20th centuries, some of which are on display at the Beekeeping Black Archives of FAMU. So thank you to our speakers, and we're excited to hear you guys.
I get excited when I hear that 20th of May music. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for inviting us here this evening. What I was saying was that in honor of our ancestors of the 20th of May here in Tallahassee since 1865, I give honor to Mr. Hunter Hill Jr., who has been my cousin, my friend, and my mentor of the 20th of May and the rural history of Tallahassee since I've grown up. So I'm going to give away to him this afternoon to me first. Thank you.
My name is Hunter Hill Jr. Now, I like to say, when I was growing up, I grew up around people my age.
Can you hold the mic a little closer?
And when I went to high school, people my age. And when I went to the military, I was in the Army with people about my age. And when I look around here tonight, I see people about my age. I grew up, I was born May the 30th, 1935. My address was Route 1, South Street, 44. I grew up on my grandfather's property. My grandfather was named Henry Hill, and his grandfather was named Ned Johnson. After the war, my grandfather, great-grandfather, Ned Johnson, received a parcel of land. It was 80 acres. That was in 1883. And I still live on that land today. The same place, a part of it's called Henry Hill Park. That's where I live. That's where I grew up. The house that I was born in. I don't live there today, but every Saturday, I go to the same place that I was born. My grandfather's property was between plantations. Borders my grandfather's property on Centerville Road was in Winthrop Plantation. To the east was Gamble Plantation. And to the west, I think the southwest was Goodwood Plantation. So what I used to do, I would get up in the morning when I was a boy, and I would decide which plantation I would go on. And I would go on either plantation, and I would stay all day. Now, I'd like to tell you something about my history. I am descendants of Florida slaves. Florida is in America, so that means I am descendants of American slaves. I am descendant of Watson and Polly Burgess, John and Priscilla Ramsey, Hunter Hills. Hunter Hills was born in 1837 in South Carolina. He was supposed to be a runaway slave. At the age of 12, he ran away from South Carolina and ended up in Florida. And that's where he was a slave until he was emancipated in 1865. My grandmother's father was named Silas Johnson. Her mother was named Elaine Hudson Johnson. She was brought from South Carolina to Florida and ended up on a slave plantation in Florida. John Ramsey was a part of the United States infantry. He came to Florida during the Civil War, during that time. And I like to say they were slaves in Florida. And according to the House of Burgess, they were supposed to be slaves for life. The House of Burgess in 1662 decreed that the status of the child follows that of the mother. That means that every child who was born to a slave woman would be a slave for life. And that's what they call handing down slavery. Now, so far as being slave for life, that was changed during the Civil War, when McCook came to Tallahassee on May the 10th, 1865. He didn't come with his army, he came with his staff. His army came later. He came from Macon, Georgia, 170 miles. Now back then, if you look at it back then, if you look at things now, they didn't have automobiles like they have today. And it's amazing that people who lived in that time couldn't foresee all the transportation we have now with automobiles. So on McCook, on the 20th day of, basically on the 19th, what he did, he asked his staff to go around to various plantations and tell the slaves his intentions. Now when he came to Florida, he made his headquarters in the Knox House. On May the 20th, he had planned to emancipate the slaves. he didn't only come to Florida to emancipate the slaves. He came over to take over the Confederate soldiers and give them a pardon. Now, there was no competition between McCook's soldiers and the Confederate soldiers. Those men had been at war for a long time, and it was time to go home. They got letters from their wives and their children and say it was about time to come home. And so that's what he did. He took over the Confederate Army. On May the 20th, he stood on the step of the Knox house. Assembled before him was a group of slaves, called them bonds people. McCook, he reached in his satchel and took out a copy of the Emancipation Proclamation, and he began to read. When he read the first sentence, before he finished the first sentence, there were 61,000 slaves in Florida, 9,089 in Lim County. And when he finished reading, he had emancipated 61,000 slaves in Florida. As he was reading the Emancipation Proclamation, the slaves didn't know what he was talking about. They had never heard anybody say what he said before, but they admired him, the way he was dressed and the way he looked. When he finished reading, he assured the slaves that they would be forever free. Can you imagine slaves your age and much younger? When he emancipated them, they didn't have anything. They couldn't read and they couldn't write. They had no jobs. They had no skills. They were skilled in farming. Basically, that's what they did. A lot of slaves traveled Mississippi Road, Thomasville Road, the number 19 and the Jacksonville Highway, looking for their loved ones, aided by the slave bill. During that period, they created lifestyles. They needed a lifestyle to help themselves for the next 25 years. It's amazing about a female slave. During slavery, she had no rights to say no. And after they were emancipated, you could say they had that right. Now they had those children. They had 3 armies here. They had to forage for food. Can you imagine? Back then, they had no food. And it's amazing if you got children to hear them say, "Mom, I'm hungry." And that's the way it was. With the aid of the Freedmen's Bureau, what they did, they established a lifestyle. The family, the black church, work, education, friends, recreation, and entertainment. They had that first celebration at Bull Pond. That's Lake Ella. Now, Lake Ella, they call it Bull Pond because of bullfrogs and lily pads. Have you ever been around Lake Ella? You see all those geese walking around Lake Ella? During that time, geese didn't like it in Leon County. Because they would have ate all of them. All of them. Another thing they did, they had to forage for food. Blackberries, blueberries, plums, pears, peaches, rabbits, squirrels, opossum, and coons, and fish. Now the reason they settled around Bull Park, because of the water. They needed water. They needed water to bathe, to cook, to wash their clothes with, and to drink, and for the animals to drink water also. And that was a community. From that point, it was moved from Bull Pond, a place called Gum Pond, that's in Woodgate. It stayed there for 58 years. And during that time, the plantation system, the sharecropping was over. And the plantation system was breaking down. They also had a school there called Gum Pond School. So it was moved from there to my grandfather's property in 1924. That was 100 years ago. We still have that celebration there. The last celebration we had there was 2023. Now, we had a place for our celebration called the Mayground. The Mayground was located in the pine thicket. And it's amazing about the pine thicket. It played this melody day and night, because when the wind blew through the leaves of the pine tree, they always made this sound. Now they were long-leaf pines. It's amazing about those pine trees. When my grandmother died, all the pine trees died eventually. Now, our celebration was based around education. The slaves weren't able to read or write during the period of slavery. And so education was their intentions. Back then, the Union soldiers, they set up schools for the freedmen. Now, can you see a grandfather taking his granddaughter and grandson to school, but he would never leave because he went to school with them also? The only problem, he didn't have no seat for him to sit in, and that was a problem for him. Now, we doing our celebrations, each kid had to go on stage and say a poem, do a skit. My grandmother was named Sarah Johnson Hill, and she and a female named is Debbie Edwards. They carried the celebration on until Miss Debbie Edwards got too old to participate. Miss Debbie Edwards was Alton East Barnes' great-great-grandmother. Now, when I was 8 years old, my grandmother gave me what we call a speech. And this is the way it went. From Native Shores, from Native Shores, I entered Drive, they saw appearing sky, and found beneath the miles of heaven a desire to be free. And answers rose and prayers were raised on that day of joy. The answer was Freedom Day, 100 years ago. Now after that, I had a meal. To this day, I don't know what I ate, but I know what I said. Basic thing is, what a child does most when they're young, they do best when they become an adult. And that is our objective. Now we had a program. Each year, each kid in the community would go on stage and say a poem. And for the last 130 years, during our program, each kid had to go on stage and say a poem. Now, it is interesting. When I was growing up, for 8 years, nobody showed up. And this is what I'm saying. Nobody from the colleges, universities, or the city showed up. It was an amazing thing because back then, the white people that our grandfathers and grandmothers worked for, they would always say, when the 20th of May came around, they would say, this is y'all's day. And so we would work for them, they would work for them a half a day, and they would let them off. And so, growing up, I didn't know who I was until sometime later. But when I was born, they had been celebrating the 20th of May for 70 years. It was very dear from them because they had gained something. You celebrate what you gain. You don't celebrate what you lose. Now I would always say, the only thing you celebrate when you lost is when you lost weight. You can go overweight. Now I never expected to stand before this audience on this day and say what I'm going to say. But I always say, when I was born with a script of life. And in my script, everything that happened to me, I experienced. I was born 88 years ago. And tonight, this is in my script. Thank you very much.
Gloria, come on up.
Okay. I'm waiting for the beat, the 20th of May beat, but then she can't seem to get find it. Thank you. That was a short one this evening that Hunter provided, right? Because when he talks about the history, the rural history of Leon County, it takes him about 2 or 3 hours to finish. So I told him, that's why I told him to go first, because he really knows how to share the history of black people in Leon County. And I have learned so much from him. We knew we were cousins, because I don't know whether y'all know it, but in slavery in the country, they used to tell us, do not marry any of these people from Testarina, St. Peter, New Zion, and Mount Olive, because you were gonna be marrying your cousin. And somebody didn't get the word. But anyway, thank y'all so much for inviting us here this evening. But we just want to share just a little bit. Hunter has already talked about slavery in Tallahassee. Slavery, period, in the United States. So I don't have to review that. Everybody here knows how to Google it. All these historians in the room. It's just good to be among you. This is my daughter. She's sort of playing these slides for me. Emancipation Proclamation, 1863. Freed all enslaved people in the rebellious states in the United after January 1st, 1863. Over 186,000 black Civil War soldiers joined the Union Army. By the time the war ended, some 38,000 slaves' lives were lost. In the South, some of the slaves were forced by their planters to fight with the Confederates. This is the time President Abraham Lincoln, I declare that all persons held as slaves and are henceforward shall be free. That's what he said in 1873. Now the slaves out there in the country, they had already heard that they were going to be free, because the planters had told them they would work for these people, and the planters had told them that freedom was coming, but they didn't know when. So they got excited. Well, anyway, the significance of 23 May, I'm here to tell my story. The significance of 23 May and why we celebrate. We celebrate it because we dedicated honor our ancestors who stayed in slavery for all those years and provided us, left us with something that we could remember themselves. I'm dressed this evening because I wanted to show y'all, after slavery, my sisters, my mothers and my grandmothers, great-grandmothers, great-great-grandmothers, they wanted to show that once they pulled off all those old raggedy clothes, they could wear some good clothes too. So that was a part of what we wanted to show this evening. Celebrating in Leon County. I grew up in the red clay hills of North Tallahassee, northeast Tallahassee, around the Mississippi Road. Even today, in my life, as old as I am, there's something about that Mississippi Road that I love to travel down by myself. All those woods, all those trees across the road. The road back then seemed to be higher, but they must have cut it down in some kind of way, because when I was a little girl, the hills used to be this high. This was the hills and we were down here. So it has changed quite a bit. The first time I was born in 1947 on Gamble Place. I come from a family of 9, and my mother and my father. They had always celebrated the 20th of May because that was the day when freedom came. That was the day that they wanted to. They were so full and some of them couldn't read or write, but they knew freedom was coming in their heart, and they showed it on that day. Before that day, they knew, because the planters had told them they were going to be free, but they didn't know when. I attended, as a child, I attended 20th of May at Testarina Primitive Baptist Church. When I came along, see, Hunter knows more than me, he's older than me. When I came along, I was one of the young generation, the baby boomers. But there had been a whole lot of people, a whole lot of 20th of Mays before I even came along. But even today, as we stand here today, we can say that our ancestors really did leave something for us over 150 years ago. Testarina used to be called Testina out on Mississippi Road. At one time, they were going to a place called Munrie, which was on the US 90. But I have documentation that shows us that on May 20th, 1865, there was an article in 1967 that showed up in the Tallahassee Democrat, and I got this from Mary May. And it said that on that particular day, 102 years ago, they celebrated the 20th of May. And from 1967 backward, that was 1865. So Testarena had been celebrating the 20th of May ever since those Union soldiers moved on the northeast side of town and went to meet them and let them know that they were free. Now, I have a story here of, this is my cousin, Herman Arnold. Do you have this one, too? I may be getting ahead of myself. Well, when I was a little girl, when we saw that wagon coming, we knew that we were fixing to have a good time. Because we used to call him Cousin Herman. Well, he had watermelon and peanuts and everything on the back of that wagon. And when I say food, oh, there was plenty of food, and I'll talk about that a little later. I've always been trained to listen to my elders. On this particular slide, this is my Aunt Idella, my mother's sister, and I having a conversation. And she's telling me all of her history, and I am so blessed to have her sit down with me and tell me all about the 20th of May that they celebrated out on Buck Lake Road and at the Munrie Plantation. And this is my mother's sister that's there. And so we were blessed to have her. My mother passed away at a very young age and left 9 children with my father. But my father always made sure that we were connected to the church and to the 20th of May celebration. And this is what I was talking about. This is Testarena, the old Testarena. You have it there, right? You remember that? I'm not normally doing these presentations, y'all, so y'all have to excuse me. But anyway, this is old Testarena. We called it Testina at the time. But this is, according to the 1967 TV News, big doings at Testarena Primitive Baptist Church on Mississippi Road yesterday as the Leon Negroes celebrated the 102nd anniversary of their own people's emancipation with traditional drum beating, whistle tooting, dinner on the grounds, and free lemonade. Okay, the next thing is this is a picture, this is a slide. The next slide is some of the old Leon County drummers from Buck Lake Road. There were many communities in the rural areas that always celebrated 20th of May. I don't know where they get Juneteenth from in this community, but we always celebrated the 20th of May in Leon County. A lot of people have been very, very confused about that, but we as historians, like what Brother Hunter is doing and the families, we have carried on this tradition for well over 150 years, and we love it. Now, I'm going to talk about some of the clothes they wear. Well, do you have this one? Okay. These are some of the slaves that were on, I believe, the Park Hill Plantation. And these are the clothes that they wore back then. And they said that they didn't want to put on no more rags. They wanted to put on something better than that. And this picture on the right here is a lady that I've known for many years, dear friend, Mrs. Maddie Marbley. And this is the way she presents herself when she was able to go to church. Miss Maddie Marbley is about 109 years old in February. She's still living. She's in one of the nursing homes here in Tallahassee, I think it's Center Point. But she's still alive, 109 years old, Miss Madden Allen. This is just a picture of what the 20th of May celebration looked like. Old 20th of May, the value of a tree, sitting underneath a tree. There's something about sitting underneath an old oak tree. We work with the New Hope Cemetery and out there at Testarino. And the one thing, the best meetings we have had in the last 4 or 5 years has been sitting under the tree. So as soon as now we meet at the Lynn County Public Library down on Patrick during the cold month, real cold. But as soon as spring breaks, we head to the old oak tree at Testarino Primitive Baptist Church. We've made a lot of decisions there. This is what the children did. They played the rain play. And I wish that we could hear the beat a little bit. Can you? I want them to be able to sort of understand what I'm saying and how it feels to present anything about the 20th of May. The drumming. Hunter didn't say much about the drumming. He may have to come back and say something about that, because that's the most important thing. Once you hear those drums beat, there's a beat like no other. But anyway, we'll get to it. Then I wanted to say something about the food. Now, what we ate back then and what they ate back then is sort of like what we had tonight. So that was right on time for us. We had fried fish, collard greens, sweet potatoes, macaroni and cheese. And then we had fried chicken and ham and all the sweet potatoes you can eat. And this comes from the earth out there, the red sweet potatoes. And there's nothing but red clay out there in northeast Tallahassee. So potatoes go real good out there. My father used to farm, and I know, because we used to eat them all the time. Okay, the next thing they had at the 20th of May is here, the cakes and the pies and the banana pudding. And the wagons were backed up in the church yard. A lot of people didn't have no cars back then, so most, it was 9,000 former slaves out there. So all of them didn't come to town. They stayed right there. That's where the celebrations were. But when those Union soldiers came in there and left the wagons and those drums, and they had a big celebration. Some of the slaves ran in the woods because they didn't understand what was going on. They ran, but later on they got happy and they came on back. But the food was great. Now, many of you might not recognize the next slide. This is called cornbread and milk. It's with a country thing. Has anybody in here ever eaten some cornbread and milk? Hello? Oh yes. That's when your mama had baked that oat. I'm not talking about Jiffy. I'm talking about that cornbread that you make from scratch with meal and baking powder. And get you some of this milk. I'm not talking about the milk that they buy from the store. I'm talking about where we had to milk those cows in the yard. And then the milk had to settle and let the cream come on top, because that's what my mama made her cakes with. And then my neighbor used to have a grow peanuts. Now you see this little peanut tree here? The peanuts don't come like that no more. Because I was in the store the other day on the south side, and they had some little old small ones. Well, last year they had some big old large ones, some big ones, the large ones. But these were the right size right here. And those were the best peanuts. And food used to have an odor to it. You could smell people cooking for a mile long, almost, back in the country that is. And the one thing at the 20th of May, my uncles used to take care of the big old barrel. And what was in this barrel when it came out, I don't know, but it tastes so good. It was fresh lemons off the tree, because see, in northeast Tallahassee, people still got trees that grow lemons and oranges and grapefruits, okay? And then Dixie crystal sugar. I remember those big old bags of sugar. And this is the ice cube on the other side here, because when they put that all that water, and then those 3 or 4 big old chunks of ice in this barrel. You couldn't get it, you couldn't wait in line long enough because the old people being drunk it all up by the time us children got there. But anyway, that's what it was like when I was growing up. And when we were growing up, the Leon County schools closed down. We got out of school at 12 o'clock. So what you're seeing sometimes happening now, it was respected that slavery was over. And we had that one day, and we would get off at, well, the parents, if they were working, many of them didn't work on that day, but they got everybody left work at 12 o'clock. And some of the oral histories that I've heard is that on US 90, when they were at Monterey, it used to be about 200 people, former slaves, and their descendants marching up to the Monterey plantation, which is out there on Enfield Road. And they would be, and the people were on the highway. This is Jacksonville Highway now. They call it Manhattan now, but when we were growing up, it was Jacksonville Highway. And the people, the travelers along the road would always stop and say, well, what's going on? What's going on? And according to the oral histories that I've heard, they told them they were going to the 20th of May celebration, the 20th of May. But it's been a joy, a pleasure, and I'm so happy to share this information with anybody I come upon, because our generations don't really know much about their history in Leon County. And that's what we are trying to do, to teach them that most of the people in Leon County, most of the black people in this town was out from, lived on the Lafayette land grant land. And they thought that after slavery, they came to town because they thought that they were going to get the 40 acres and a mule. They shouted, they celebrated, they had a good time, and then they finally realized, we don't have a place to stay. We don't have no food. We don't have nothing. And that's what Frederick Douglass and the federal government, Abraham Lincoln had probably come by. But anyway, that's when they had to do something to help these poor people, because they had absolutely nothing. So many of them went back to the plantation, and that's where the history of sharecropping comes in. Because I have, in my research, I have found all of my ancestors on both my mother and father's side that were in slavery. And it's heartening when you can go and find someone, because when I went home and I found my dad's people, I went home and cried, looked up at his picture, because my parents, my mother died in 57, my father in 65. And this was just a few years ago, and I cried, I said, Dad, I found your people. A lot of people didn't understand, over at the New Hope Cemetery that we've been working on, Daddy, I found your people. And that was so encouraging to me. And then later on, you know, some of them on my mother's side were on the plantation in Goodwood. I've studied El Destino, that's where one of my father's sides were. The other side, the Jefferson, yes, I'm Gloria, Jefferson, and Anderson. And lo and behold, yes, my people come from Virginia. Yes. 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 And everybody asks, well, how'd you get here? Well, in 1829, after President Jefferson had passed away, Francis X came to Tallahassee, along with his family, along with all his personal belongings, and his father had bequeathed him over 100 slaves that had belonged to his mother, Mariah. And Francis brought them to Tallahassee. And he bought a plantation out on Mickasika Road, just near the Mickasika and Crump Road. And that's where the Jeffersons are from. They helped start the Tuscarora Church. So that's how we got here. So we had a family reunion this past November. And I was telling my family that. I said, yes, based on my research, and based on what I've read, that yes, we could be descendants of President Thomas Jefferson. So, I'm not angry. I'm just happy that I was able to find where my people came from. And that means so much to me, and I want to thank Lonnie. Is Lonnie left already? Lonnie, are you there? Okay. Lonnie is the one who sort of helped me get there, because years ago I was in a meeting, Florida Historical Society, and I was telling them about this cemetery that I had found, and they told me that I need to see 5 people before I left that meeting. And one of them, the last one I met, was Lonnie. And Lonnie has helped us so much, along with the Tallahassee Historical Society, come a long way with that New Hope Cemetery. Because believe it or not, out on behind Tuscarena Primitive Baptist Church on Mississippi Road. Believe it or not, that's where the Jeffersons were, and that's where not only the Jeffersons were there, but many of the other families too. So, and they're interred there in that cemetery, New Hope Cemetery. So thank you all so much for hearing us, and I hope all of the mothers and grandmothers and great-grandmothers are happy Mother's Day. This is what the women put on their
Any questions? Any questions for Gloria or Hunter? I'll try.
See, when we heard that music, we were so excited, we could hear it before we got to the church. There they go, the old people, the children playing, the grandkids, the food, the people. Because see, it's not like it is now. It's not like it is now. You see your father, but back then, we could only have
Well, thank you very much, Gloria and Hunter. We have a little something for you. This is our traditional honorarium, the official Tallahassee Historical Society travel mug. So wherever you go, thank you all very much. Stay around and talk to them, ask them questions and so forth. I will say this is our last meeting of the season. We will be back here the second Thursday in October. Do never fear though, we're not going away. You will hear from us this summer as historical markers get unveiled, and as we are asking for volunteers for ideas for speakers for next year and for providing food at our meetings. So if you have any ideas for any of this stuff, get back with us. There's plenty of food still tonight. Please help yourself. Take some home. Let's help the staff here clean up a little bit as we leave and so forth. And you know, down at the legislature, they always, at the end of session, always drop, what is it, a silk handkerchief, silk hanky? I don't have a hanky, but I've got a Kleenex. So I will adjourn sine die for the season and drop the Kleenex. So thank you all so much for being part of us this year.